It's on.
Welcome everyone. Welcome to the transition to cleaner energies, brought to you by Hello Tomorrow and BCG. In the past year, we've experienced an exponential acceleration in climate tech ventures and capital. And today we're going to dive into two of the latest trends that are shaping the future of clean energies. So I'm Renita Kalhorn, the moderator and an executive coach who specializes in working with deep tech founders. And our speakers are Marco Duso, who's a partner at Boston Consulting Group and a member of the founding team of the BCG Center for Climate and Sustainability, and Luca MAURICE, who is a deep tech and innovation consultant at Hello Tomorrow. So before we dive into the conversation, I think it would be helpful for you to have some background about Hello Tomorrow so you can put all of this into context. So for over a decade, Hello Tomorrow has been building this global deep tech ecosystem where it acts as a catalyst to accelerate the development of radical solutions for industry's biggest challenges. And it does this through a synergistic model. So it takes that global ecosystem of nearly 10,000 startups, VCs, experts, and which gives them direct access to the latest trends and technologies and this diverse pool of expertise. And then they can then provide this tailored consulting to industry leaders in helping them anticipate key trends and build ventures to take advantage of high growth business opportunities. So this network of deep tech startups is truly global, with 128 countries represented, 7 industry categories, which you can see there at the bottom. And the startups are in various stages of maturity, from the earliest proof of concept to commercialization in the market. And this slide shows the breakdown from the 8th edition of Hello Tomorrow's Deep Tech Startup Competition, where this year they chose 700 startups from a pool of 4,000 applicants. And they'll be pitching at the Global Summit in March 2023. And then finally, Hello Tomorrow has been partnering with BCG to write these very thoroughly researched reports on different aspects of deep tech. And you can find all of these on the Hello Tomorrow site for free. And since you signed up for this webinar, you'll be getting the latest report on cleaner energies direct to your inbox. So with that, let's dive in. We're still waiting for Marco to show up, but I hope he'll be here momentarily. And just so you know, we're going to leave some time for questions at the end. So feel free to start putting your questions in you'll see the question tab there on the bottom right hand. Were you going to say something, Luca?
No, it's just we are having just a very quick technical issue with Marco, but he's just attending. Yeah.
Okay. So I will continue, and hopefully Marco will make it.
Please, yeah, thank you. It's just a couple of minutes.
Okay. So despite progress in deploying electricity generation and storage technologies that can help us reach this very ambitious goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees, fossil fuels still represent 80% of the world's energy consumption. But today, the three of us are going to make the case for counterintuitive optimism. Because as of last Wednesday, $16 billion has flowed into the climate tech sector in 2022, following last year's record of $30.4 billion, according to PitchBook. And now the layoffs in big tech are actually a silver lining, because a lot of that talent is available now to move into climate tech startups. So, is Marco here?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I think we can start to deep dive in the topics. Is really soon going to connect. Yeah. So
okay.
first of all,
let's start.
Yeah.
Let me give you a quick setup.
Okay, go ahead.
So I know that you've been working with a lot of these startups in the ecosystem in the climate tech. So what are you seeing? What are some of the trends? Can you share some of the stories, the cool startups that you're working with?
Sure. First of all, our goal here is really to present the energy transition as really an opportunity for the industry, for the entire ecosystem, which can be the investors, the corporates, but also the regulatory people. We really want to show that our companies are working on really accelerating the development of the energy transition, but they also need you a lot to help them funding, but also developing their technologies, which sometimes really needs the perception of the industrial world. So the first thing I would like to say is that the energy sector in deep tech is growing a lot. So it used to be not the first topic of the deep tech startups, but every year it's increasing. So now it represents about 20% of Hello Tomorrow's ecosystem. It used to be much less. And so it's growing, it's maturing. And I think we are at a key momentum right now to help them. Some of the technologies are already developed, and some are being developed right now. I'm just inviting Marco. He's connecting. Sorry, really, for this really technical issue. But this year, we selected about 100 companies that are part of our ecosystem and that provide energy solution. Hello, Marco.
Hey, guys, everyone. Some technical difficulties, but I'm here.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just saying that we have all a lot of every year we have more energy related startups in the ecosystem, and that there are really they need all those people connected here to help them scale. And maybe we can go into the introduction of the key topics that are being addressed by these startups.
Sure.
Great. Do you want me to do a bit of an intro about the topic, or sorry, because I missed the first part.
Yeah, so I actually set you up, Marco, by saying that we're going to take this approach of counterintuitive optimism and talk about the opportunities amidst this big challenge that we face. So, what's your take on this? Where do you see the opportunities in all of this?
Yeah. No, thanks for that, Renita, and hi, everyone. I think probably Renita did the introduction for me, but basically I'm partner in BCG in our London office, and I've been building our climate practice in the past few years, and in particular BCG Green Ventures in the last couple of years. So for me, it's all about translating climate from a challenge into an opportunity. And I really believe it's going to be the only way we're going to see really exponential action. We are seeing exponential action in climate and in the energy transition. And this is really supported by data. So a couple of angles. If we look at corporate, one thing that is often overlooked is the actual performance of the companies that transition very ambitiously. For example, if we take the utilities sector, we know that a handful of companies such as Enel, NextEra, Iberdrola, Ørsted, actually in the 3 years between 2018, 2021, at the same total shareholder return of big tech, of Google, Apple, Amazon, and so on, which we all knew was like a phenomenal total shareholder return, right? But these companies were performing at the same level, while the rest of the energy sector really, really struggled. So this is to say there is a real recognition of a future potential already in the markets, and the companies that have managed to transition very ambitiously, very effectively, are seeing the value. Another lens is on the venture and startup side. I think up to like 3 years ago, there were like less than 10, probably 5, 6, what we would call climate ventures, climate unicorns. So companies, startups in the climate and energy transition space at a 1 billion plus valuation. And I think now we are above 60. So definitely on an exponential curve. So I am very, very positive from this point of view. I really think that like with a new policy frameworks, with a new investors approaches, I really think there is like energy transition and climate are more an opportunity than anything else.
Thank you for that. So why don't we go back to you, Luca? You've identified these two trends, and maybe you could share what those are and the startups that you see doing the most interesting work.
Sure, yeah, thank you. Maybe it's good to put more clarity on what we mean by energy startups. So it's a huge field, of course, and every year we analyze hundreds of them. And there is clearly two mega trends, I would say, that really step up in terms of number, but also of quality of startups. And those two are, first of all, that deep tech startups really help the scaling of the electrification of a lot of usage. And for that, they provide a lot of solutions for improving lithium-ion batteries um, with new processes making, with new materials for making it more efficient, with more durability, also more safety on those batteries. We have other kind of batteries, new kind of storage system, which we'll give a bit of example later. So that's really on the electricity side. And then on the fuel, I would say, side, we see a big rise into the number of companies that are providing cleaner pathways to make green hydrogen, or also other kind of pathways to make what we say clean hydrogen. So it's not the green one, it's other kind of other color, I would say, of hydrogen, but still they try to make it very clean. I will also give some example about that. And some companies are really working on developing fuels from fermentation or from new sources such as CO2. So companies really closing the loop between CO2 emissions and CO2 utilization. So those are really the big trends. And first one being, of course, the electrification and the energy storage solutions. I'm happy to dive on those startups. Maybe we can give a bigger scope on all those challenges facing that the sector faces.
That would be great. Are there particular startups that you'd like to highlight?
Sure. So regarding energy storage, there's a lot of processes that can be done, but we know that classical lithium-based batteries kind of have their limitations. So we have companies working on liquid and air energy storage, which is also kind of a costly solution, but is very interesting for a bit longer term. So we have companies like Fellas in Germany who are working to really improve this technology that already exists, but they make it better. They're having a whole process, a turnkey solution in the form of containers. So it's scalable also and modular, and they can really plug into any wind or solar or hybrid systems to really effectively store energy and give it back to the grid when needed. And they managed to get down to a cost of 5 cents per kilowatt of energy stored for megawatt project, I would say. So we can see that we have companies really improving existing processes, and we have other kind of companies. I think, Marco, you had also some examples about long-term storage startups.
Yeah, sure. I think taking one step back is just on electrification and putting a couple of numbers on the size of a challenge that we're going to face. Today, electricity accounts for around 20% of primary energy demand. And pretty much all scenarios that think that like the scenarios that are built to say we're going to reach net zero in 2050 arrive to a sort of, let's say, range of 40 to 50% of primary energy demand for electricity. So really, it's going to be a massive transformation toward electrons. And often this is looked at from the supply side of renewables or nuclear and such. But it's not just supply side, right? Like, so if we think about only supply, ultimately nothing will happen. The demand side is equally important, and the enabling side is equally important. So if we take the demand side, I think it's ultimately going to be three things, right? It's going to be electrification of transport. And again, we know that for passenger vehicle, this is well underway. But for commercial vehicles, it's pretty nascent yet. And it could be like there are still pathways with other fuels, but let's say this is still a lot of innovation and work to be done. It's electrification of heating, and it's ultimate electrification of other industrial processes, especially heating. So this is to say that the magnitude of the challenge of a demand side is going to be massive and is going to disrupt and transform multiple industries. On the enabling side, like you were saying, like long duration energy storage is going to be a fundamental one, because networks can get up to 60-70% of renewables. But after that, given the intermittence of the supply, there is a need to have either baseload electricity or real solution for long duration energy storage. Long duration energy storage is defined as with a use case above 4 hours, because we know that basically below 4 hours, lithium-ion batteries are the primary solution. But above 4 hours, there's all sorts of potential use cases. And the other thing, like there are still multiple technology pathways, right? I don't think there is a winner yet. And probably we're going to have multiple winners depending on the specific use case. Just to make a very concrete example, a player we've been working with is called Energy Dome. Mm-hmm. It's an Italian venture, and that has invented the CO2 battery. Okay. And the CO2 battery is basically using liquid and gas state CO2 as a form of energy storage, with use cases that go all the way, let's say, from short term to 24 plus hours. And they have already a large scale commercial plant in operation. And now they're really like one of these climate ventures that is looking for scale up. So looking for partners and clients, frankly, in the corporate and industrial world.
Energy Dome. Okay.
Yeah,
how about you, Luca? Any more to add?
Sure. Yeah, we're going to put all the startups we see we are quoting. We try to put them on the chat. So yeah, thank you, Marco, for really highlighting the fact that it won't be a good strategy maybe to only try to find the one size fits all solution for storage. How the industry is getting shaped, we really believe that there's a lot of strategy and different types of technology that have to be developed at the same time, so that we can also answer different kind of needs and be a bit more resilient. So yeah, I would like to showcase maybe a startup that we appreciate, because they came to us with a very ambitious technology. We were quite skeptical, and now they're demonstrating that it works. So I want to talk about gravity-based storage. So maybe a lot of you have already seen the videos of the big concrete weights that are being pulled up very high in a tower, and then put back when electricity is needed. Actually, if we look at the numbers, the infrastructure costs would be very, very big, and the size of the weights that need to be pulled to have really scalable solutions are very, very high too. So it's an interesting solution, but maybe quite complicated. But we have this company called Gravitricity. They're based in the UK, and they propose another way of doing it, is that they don't move weights above ground, but they move weights below ground. So basically, they use energy surplus of electricity to put weights up to the surface level, and then when energy is needed, they just let it go down into the hole they digged. And basically, digging a hole and mastering this is much less costly than building a tower and use cranes to put weights very up in the sky. So As I told, we were a bit skeptical, but they just this year validated the alpha demonstrator of their project in the UK. They built 250 kilowatt pilot in the UK, and they demonstrated that they can respond in less than a second to the grid needs, and that they have basically a round trip efficiency of about 80%, so which is comparable to traditional batteries. So 250 kilowatt is not a lot, but the technology works, and it possibly can scale because they used only 25 tons weight and with a 50-meter hole in the ground. So we can imagine with distributed network of those solutions and with bigger scale that we can reach quite a decent amount of energy that is stored this way in a way that is really long term, in the sense that you don't really have chemical reactions that can last or frictions with the technology. So these kind of companies, they really need funding, of course, but they also need the curiosity. They need that the corporate, the energy industry really stay aware and just accepts to try, also just to see, to watch if it works, because as I said, we were skeptical, and they proved that it can work and that they have some kind of role to play. As we said, it's not going to be the only solution we have, but it's a solution that can be utilized in specific places, and that is quite safe also and very long term. So yeah, to come back on the point of Marco, we really need a diversity of solutions, and some are really, maybe we can think fast forward, but in the end, for now, they've been proving that they work. And so we really invite the industry to take a look at them and take the time, and hopefully in the end scale with them.
So I have a question regarding that, because I sort of started talking about the ecosystem that Hello Tomorrow has created, because there's no one startup, no one company that's going to find the complete solution. This is really going to be an ecosystem-driven, initiative. And so I'm curious, maybe can you bring some more precision to what are some of the ways that corporates might work with these startups, either Gravitricity or some of the other startups that you've seen? What are some of the specific ways they might collaborate or work to scale a working technology?
Go ahead, Marco.
Either one.
Yeah, I can give a couple of views on this. One is, I think startups love capital, but more than capital, they love revenues. And so I think that like corporates, if they really want to drive innovation in this space, the number one thing that they probably can do is to be the first customers of some of these innovators. And corporates have physical assets, right? Like, so a lot of this is physical climate technologies, and so they can help to create basically pilots, adopt technology, create the first revenues for some of these players. So this is my perspective, probably the number one case. Number two is innovate and transform their own business model. So I think we see it more and more. Like, there is basically a headline every week of like an incumbent player. I read yesterday, I think it was General Motors, that like electric vehicle incubated venture is already a unicorn in like less than 18 months, with tens of thousands of vehicles already pre-ordered. This is just to say, in some of the technologies that are a bit more mature, I think incumbents can really come in and play the game at scale. If we want to make an analogy, I think with COVID and the vaccines development can be about, for example, the partnership between BioNTech and Pfizer, right? In which ultimately the venture came up with the innovation, but then the corporate helped to bring it at scale. So I think like that role is really important. And maybe like the third one is about really make the corporate support system change. This means I mean, and I think this is more and more the case, not plain, resisting to change, but actually supporting the change. It can be in the form of advocating policy. It can be in the form of, creating partnerships or, corporate alliances that support the development and adoption of these new solutions.
Yeah, those are great points. So first of all, revenue trumps capital. And for some of these incumbents, instead of trying to protect their position, they could actually be looking for ways to be allies and amplify the work that startups are doing, move in the same direction.
Indeed, and to be very blunt, in the last 5 years that I've been working pretty much all the time in the climate space, I have almost never seen a strategy being too ambitious on climate action if it was related to the core. Just because policy and all other trends are materializing much faster than we expect. It's human nature to think that change will be linear, but it's not. And especially in climate, it is not going to be linear. Even if COP26 and 7 are not yet delivering what we want, what we need, this does not mean that the context is not changing radically for corporates. In Europe, that was true already like a couple of years ago. In the US, is becoming true now with the IRA policy. In many other parts of the world, it's true. Value chain, time chains are changing. So like it's almost impossible to be too ambitious here. Obviously, the strategy has to be the right one, playing to the core capabilities and assets of a company. But yeah, it's a nice space to be, because you can be as ambitious as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm. And without getting too much into politics, I see a question here in the chat about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Do you have any comments on how is that accelerating the move to cleaner energies? What do you see there?
I mean, it's probably effects that go in opposite directions. Because from one point of view, for example, it's driving in the very short term the use of coal or more gas.
Short
but
term.
at the same time, yeah, that's a very short term effect. But if in reality we look at the broader effects, is actually supporting a much more decisive acceleration in renewables, and frankly also in nuclear. Because we, like, not just European countries, but other countries realize that actually energy independence is very important. And so in reality, if you actually don't have hydrocarbon reserves in your country or not enough, then you need to have like a energy supply strategy that accounts for that. So in the short term, there are a lot of disruptions, not least the one on supply chains for some materials, minerals. But I think in the long term, actually, these very unfortunate events are actually accelerating an inevitable truth, which is like the countries without hydrocarbons will transition very quickly in the demand and supply side.
Yeah, I mean, it's very human nature, isn't it, to wait till things get extreme before you change. So in effect, that's what the war has done, created this very extreme environment to force change.
Yeah, there's always been a scenario of emissions that was considered, in which basically humanity would be like very slow, and then all of a sudden would have to react in a very aggressive way, which we don't still see fully, right? Humanity is not reacting in the same way it reacted to COVID, to the climate emergency. But it's still a potential scenario that will happen. And unfortunately, that will bring much more disruption rather than trying to do it more gradually.
Yeah. Luca, did you want to add anything in terms of storage? Anything else?
Not storage, just from what Marco just said. Indeed, in the short term, we're seeing the reopening of coal plants, but in the longer term, it's driving much more development on renewables and other kind of technology. For instance, the last EU package on energy, I think was in April or May, really raised much more the ambitions of the EU regarding solar photovoltaics and other kind of technologies like that. So, but we won't see the effect like this winter, of course. But it's accelerating something that was already going on. Now it would be pretentious to say where we will be in 10 years, but I believe on the long term it will try kind of accelerate some of the newer technologies at least.
Right, and then create more ambition. This idea that not only is this possible, it's something we have to focus on. Okay, so should we shift to hydrogen production? Where are we in terms of deploying a more robust hydrogen production environment? Marco, do you want to start us off there?
Sure, I can start, and maybe I start with adding one word, which is clean or even green hydrogen, let's say.
Thank you.
Because we know that hydrogen is already, it exists today and is already used in some sectors, but is not clean. And ultimately we'll have to transition in those sectors to clean hydrogen, and potentially in others where, for example, electrification does not really make sense. Maybe just to ground it in a couple of facts. So first of all, today clean hydrogen is a relatively small and fragmented space. In 10 years, it will look radically different, but we are now living this transition, which is at the same time very exciting, but also very complex. If we think just about the value chain of hydrogen, it goes from energy generation. In this case, we talked, for example, about renewables, to hydrogen production through electrolyzer, conversion, compression, to then hydrogen distribution and storage. And these again can take various forms, from pipelines to then ships or trucks, and then go into different hydrogen applications. Again, here we could have like a midpoint of further transport. But when we get into applications is where it gets really interesting, because yes, on one side we need like more and cheaper electricity, renewable generation. On the other side, we need innovation in the technologies for hydrogen production, so electrolyzer, conversion, and compression. But more than anything, we need basically to create the demand. So the demand that exists today is the demand in the heavy industry sector, so chemicals, actually in refining itself. Where we may see demand coming in the future will be a mix of the technologies from a demand side and how they will evolve. Let's take, for example, trucks. There is still a debate whether trucks will go toward electric or toward hydrogen, and also it will depend on hydrogen itself. How cheap can green hydrogen be? And when we say how cheap can green hydrogen be, we have to consider policy and incentives and subsidies, not just the technology itself, at least in the short term. And we know that the IRA in the US is really going to help from this point. So if I try to probably simplify, where we see the applications for the future are going to be in industry again, so in chemicals or in new built iron and steel production sites. We're going to see it in part of transportation, in particular trucks, off highway, in ships, potentially green ammonia. And I guess two question marks on rail, for example, in heavy cargo or in planes. And it could also take, we could also see demand in the energy sector itself as a sort of energy storage, especially as off-grid backup power. So maybe that as a quick overview on hydrogen, clean hydrogen.
So again, you're pointing out that it's not just enough to have these amazing new technologies. We also need the demand that's going to actually use them. So we need the companies that are willing to change their business models, their systems, their processes. Governments also. There's going to be a lot of need the mindset that's open to changing the way things are done currently, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
Luca.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's true that we're seeing a lot of increase in the demand from a lot of industries. Our startups even can attest for that. Maybe I think on the short term, it will be interesting to question maybe a prioritization of the hydrogen usage. Should it go to every industry, or should we prioritize where it has the most impact? For me, it's an open question. Also, if we look at the capacity of green hydrogen that we can say we can make in 2030, how much can it be spread in the entire industry? Would it be enough? Those are questions that are for me important, and that's where a lot of startups are providing some kind of answers. So some are really focusing on having better electrolysis from water. So they're providing membranes, they're providing new kind of electrolyzers, they're providing better cathodes, etc. They're providing new ways really of producing hydrogen from the electrolysis side. And we have also companies that are trying to find new source of H2. So for instance, we have companies, would like to mention Spark Cleantech, I think originating from CEA Grenoble. They are basically providing a process of plasmalysis. So they use plasmas to cut down methane, CH4. Today, CH4 methane is steam reformed, a process that uses a lot of energy. And plasmalysis has a much more interesting energy consumption. And basically, a low temperature plasma is used to break down the CH4 molecule. Now, this technology is much more competitive, not on super big volumes for one process, but more on lower volumes. And so this startup is also questioning our model of producing hydrogen. Should we have those mega factories producing a huge amount of hydrogen, or should we more distribute the production of hydrogen where it's actually needed? So what they propose is not to try to scale something that at very high volumes would be, we don't know if it would be still very cost competitive, but why would not have these H2 production containers co-located where it's going to be used? For instance, at a charging station for trucks, or on the side of a chemical manufacturing company, and using the actual CH4 pipelines, but transforming it with their plasma containers, and you directly have H2 delivered, so you don't have also the transportation issue, which is a big challenge for hydrogen. So I think they're also questioning the model of how we distribute, we produce, and it's interesting to take it into consideration for corporates and investors. Really, it's not just the tech itself; it's really how they do it, what is really their market, do they really understand where they bring value, how they deliver it, what kind of companies can really benefit. And so it's all this analysis that will make a lot of sense, and that will help them to really scale. So yeah, I would just wanted to make a point about the model of producing, and I think we're some of the innovations anyway are working towards a much more distributed network of producers co-located with utilizers.
Marco, did you want to add anything?
Maybe just one generic point, which is, as I mentioned, the whole value chain will have to be created. So I think there is going to be opportunities in many spaces. If we think about hydrogen production, I think we have done some estimates. So just to give you a couple of numbers, we estimate that the market potential for hydrogen for electrolyzers is going to be around 50 to 60 billion. If we look at other parts of the value chain, distribution and storage is going to be around 25, 30 billion. Hydrogen conversion, for example, for ammonia, is going to be 35 to 40 billion. And then there is all the world of applications and demand side. There is potentially another 80 to 100 billion. So just to give a few figures, right? Like, because I think it's good to ground it into some numbers. the opportunity is huge here. And I think we see a lot of very exciting technology, a lot of exciting players. I've heard some going for, let's say, large scale solutions, other going for small scale modular ones. And Apter is a good example that comes to mind in production of modular electrolyzers. So yeah, I think like it's another very exciting space.
Excellent. So lots to be optimistic about, even though there are challenges to face. Is there anything else you wanted, any other highlight, any other startups you wanted to highlight before we start to look at questions?
I'm happy to go with any question. I don't know
Okay.
if you had any other point from the startups you work with.
Yes, I see one from Rishit who says, what have been the most promising carbon utilization pathways you found in the European startup ecosystem so far?
I mean, I don't know if it's the most promising, but definitely one that is very, very interesting one is to use it to produce e-fuels for aviation. So maybe just to make it a bit more clear for everyone, like one of the solutions for climate is to basically see how we can capture carbon from other, industrial uses where it's actually a byproduct of combustion, or whether we actually capture it directly from the air, because ultimately we're going to have to get to net zero, and the net means basically offsetting the emissions. So my example was basically in the space of direct air capture. I think Climeworks is a very cool company, right? And we are partnering with them as well. And I think, like, just the things that you can do with carbon beyond storing it underground. One of the interesting things that you can do is actually use it to produce e-fuels that can be used for aviation. Could be like a long-term destination fuel for aviation.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with Marco. Also, regarding the CO2 economy, the CCUS, it's something that really accelerated a lot this year. We've been observing it. You can see it actually on the investment side. The investment in CCUS in the world really skyrocketed. We are seeing a lot of applications in the concrete in production. CO2 can be injected for the curing process, but for other kind of sort of processes, so where it's trapped basically in concrete. So we're seeing a lot of potential here. Concrete companies are very interested, I believe. But yeah, the sustainable aviation fuels is something that we're actually working on with companies from the oil and gas sector, such as Repsol. We actually have final pitches in December 15. If you want to attend, you will have very very big companies in the sector, such as Lanzatech, providing their pitching their technology. But basically, yeah, sustainable aviation fuels is a very big topic, and there is a company in Germany called Ineratech who is working on those topics, and they're having new kind of like chemical reactor design. And what he was telling me, the business developer of this company was telling me that actually the regulations in place will have a key role in their development. So today the plan is that by 2025 there is a quota of sustainable aviation fuels in the blend of airplanes in Europe, and it should be around 2%. So in 2025, sorry, you should have about 2% of the airplane that is powered by SAF, so sustainable aviation fuels. And he was telling me that if it could be a bit more ambitious regarding the size and regarding the timeline where it's going to increase, this would have a very dramatic role in their scaling of their technology, because they can unlock more funding. They will have, the corporates will also have to put much more efforts for scaling it. So here we have the the notion of the ambitions of the regulations, but also of the corporate sector in the end. I mean, they have to respect the quota, but it's if they can do more, they can. So yeah, there is all those ecosystem that needs to try to really take the innovation and help those companies, really from the funding to the demand, as Marco has been emphasizing on, to the corporates that make pilots, etc., such as our clients. So so yeah, this is the key message here. It's about all those actors together that will help them to scale.
That's such a good point, Luca, because if each actor in the ecosystem is just a little bit more ambitious, then that combined effect really creates an exponential acceleration, I think.
Yeah, and frankly, it's what we are also seeing at country level, because I think there were a couple of comments about, green hydrogen is not economical, and while it's fair, we are also seeing, like policy incentives not anymore being talked about, but like become real. And if I think about, why is this happening? It's not happening just because countries want to decarbonize to do the right thing. It's happening because countries are realizing that now it's a race to actually be the developers of these technologies and of these value chains. So I think we are witnessing the start of a very healthy competition between European countries who thought they were ahead, United States, which will try to get ahead with a new policy, and they are frankly very good in innovation. Part of Asia, China, which is miles ahead in several technologies or sectors, like just think about electric commercial vehicles, miles ahead. Other countries such as Japan. And so I just want to put it out there because like what you were referring to, Renita, as sort of, let's say, exponential action, I think is going to happen also at country level in a very healthy way now.
In a very healthy way. Yeah, that's very promising. Here's a question, I think, for you, Luca. What are the best ways to scout clean tech startups? And it might be helpful for you just to give a brief, example of how corporates can work with startups. What's the role that Hello Tomorrow can play in helping corporates find those startups?
So yeah, thank you to give the opportunity to talk about that. So Hello Tomorrow helps in many ways. The first one is that we are helping corporates to kind of like navigate throughout this ecosystem. What is already available, what is currently being developed. So this is about trends. It's about understanding the value of different technologies, the kind of services we provide, but also if you really want to get connected with specific technologies, we can organize specific call for projects, challenges, or really sourcing on those kind of solutions that you're looking for, and up to helping you build new ventures, new revenue streams. So we try to provide the entire, I would say, package for helping you. But yeah, the best way to get connected is to be part of the ecosystem. You have a lot of events. You have a lot of companies working there. You have a lot of, I see in the chat that there's a lot of discussion around that. So people have a lot to share. And mainly it's about events where connection happen. We have a big event every year. Hello Tomorrow is the Hello Tomorrow Global Summit in March in Paris. And here we really have pavilion for meeting startups, etc., getting connected through them. So feel free to come to ask us, but there's also a lot of events around the world regarding that.
Mm-hmm. So really, Hello Tomorrow also helps corporates gain speed because you've done a lot of the work of vetting these startups. You know what the landscape looks like. You know which kind of models can work. So speed is invaluable.
Yeah, we're also following them for quite some years now. Some we've found, as the one I was mentioning before, was kind of like an idea of gravity, using gravity for storage. As I said, we were a bit skeptical, but we follow them. Now we see they're working. They have demonstration, and now if we have, for instance, opportunities, we know we can connect with them. We know their features, If you have a corporate interested, we can make the in between, but we can also help them getting aligned and have a faster collaboration. Yeah, of course.
Cool. Here's a question I think that you've already addressed to some extent, but I'll put it out there. Keith is asking, aside from investment, talent, and policy, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing startups and scale-ups in this sector? Are there any other challenges we haven't mentioned?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because the VC world especially has been relatively spoiled in the last 20 years with asset-light opportunities. So if you think about digital, fintech, even, let's say, to a certain extent, biopharma, I don't think they're that complex if you compare them to climate tech, which is primarily physical technologies. So if we can isolate like one challenge, I think for me is like this one, which is how do you really grow and scale physical technologies ventures? And it's multiple things, right? It's very hard to get first customers because it's very hard to let's say, take a steel player, right? Like that, it's already a very hard business to operate. What is their incentive to be the first adopters of an innovation in their asset? So this is like one complexity. The second complexity is manufacturing of physical technologies. So how do you go from, like producing something in the lab or, in a relatively manual way to actually industrialize it and lower cost? And it's a chicken and egg with volumes. So you need volumes to achieve economies of scale, but it's also very hard to operationalize that in terms of manufacturing. And then finally, there is like the scaling globally element, right? Like it was much easier to scale something digitally, but actually, scaling physical requires having commercial teams, going to other countries where, it's relatively complex. So some of the value that I think like we can help ventures with is actually to help in this scale up acceleration process.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, there's a lot of challenges for each climate startup or energy startup, and it's quite specific to their technology, to their industry, to what they do. For instance, we have startups now harvesting the energy from waves on the coast, transforming it into electricity, such as EcoWave Power is doing in Israel. They are quite pioneering this. And basically, they were telling me that they have really issues for the regulation side because like countries do not have really this origin of energy in their tarification or different kind of regulations around that. And so it takes a lot of time for them each time they're going to do another pilot in another country. It takes a lot of time to cope with the regulations that are just kind of like not made because it's new. So for them, it's about regulations and also finance, of course, but that's almost all the time a challenge. But if you take another company like NEU Battery Materials from Singapore, they're recycling end of life batteries. They're crushing them. They have an electrochemical process to recover the lithium that is pure enough to being put back into the battery manufacturing chain. And so you could think that their main challenge would be like finance a big, industry of transforming end-of-life batteries to lithium. But basically, they secure the funding. They have the industrial plant working. But the CEO told me that actually the biggest challenge he has is to really secure enough end-of-life batteries to enter the chain. So it really depends on what they do, where they are. And once again, for me, it's really about creating the ecosystem that make it able to really become a reality. And here the ecosystem is about the whole value chain from the end-of-life batteries, collecting it, gathering it, and also having the battery manufacturers that accept to have recycled lithium. Maybe it's not their usage or what they're used to, but basically it's a competitive lithium, especially on the environmental side. And so it's about creating this whole new chain around them. That is the biggest challenge. So it really depends on the companies.
Thank you. So I think that brings us full circle. I mean, I set us up with this idea that we could be optimistic about the future, despite all the challenges. And Marco and Luca have shared some of those reasons to be optimistic. The amazing technologies that are being developed, and yet we do need to create this cooperation. We need ambitious goals on the part of all the actors in the ecosystem to really make this happen. So any last words from you, Marco and Luca? Marco, why don't you
I mean, if I have an opportunity to say last few words, I would say that working in this space sometimes feels a bit daunting, because you think like, okay, the solving the climate challenge, there is no silver bullet, there is not a single technology, not a single startup which will solve it. But it's also like super, super exciting. It's full of purpose, and as I mentioned at the beginning, full of opportunities. So I often say that there has never been a better time to be an entrepreneur that wants to make the world a better place than today.
Yeah, it's kind of the sweet spot, isn't it?
Last point connected to this, capital is not yet going to be an issue here. So even if we see the recession looming, I think like Climate Tech VC published last week that 90 billion were raised by Climate VC and PE in the last 2 years only. And I think like half of that is still dry powder. So the reality is that there is going to be a lot of potential for investments.
Yeah, that's great. And Luca, do you want to take us home?
Yeah, agreed. Funding climate tech is really being huge now. Final take is that well, if you're really interested in this, in helping this, we work globally, and we really need all actors involved that have really ambition. As Marco said, sometimes it can look like a very overwhelming challenge, but all the teams we've worked with are really passionate. Gives a lot of sense, purpose, and so so it's a very exciting field to drive new technologies, new solutions, and it gives also a lot of excitement and a lot of passion about the work.
Yeah, it's exciting to be there right at the tipping point, isn't it? When you can really make a difference. Thank you to both of you for your insights and your opinions. Thanks to everybody for joining us. Make sure you check your inbox for the Cleaner Energies report that will be coming out. And we'll look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for the interactions. Have a great day. Bye-bye.